Good afternoon, I'm Giovanni Dennis with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're joining us online at onespotmedia.com. 27 Jamaicans who have been stranded in Britain will return home later today. This as permission has been granted for them to land, despite the closure of Jamaica's borders to incoming flights from the United Kingdom. The incoming Boeing 777 aircraft will later repatriate British nationals and residents to the UK on Thursday. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, families of arriving passengers are asked not to meet at the airport as the individuals will be housed in a government-managed quarantine facility for 14 days. The beating of several boys at the privately run Clifton Boys' Home in Westmoreland has raised several concerns. Chief among them, the impact of such action on children who come from abusive households. Krista Campbell explores.
What happens to a child who's taken from an abusive home and ends up being beaten at a care facility? It's one of the issues coming out of the investigation at the Clifton Boys' Home in Westmoreland. The Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA, has been providing counseling for the children at the home since it learned some were being flogged. The CPFSA says the boys are in good spirits, but child psychiatrist at the Manchester-based Northern Caribbean University, NCU, Dr. Orlean Brown Earl, says there could be underlying issues.
If you and I hit an adult the way we hit children, it's a court case, It's a court case. So we need to make sure that we don't do it, because clearly not only is it wrong, it is harmful and will cause so much damage to these children.
Children 7 to 18 years old are sent to the Clifton Boys' Home by the state because they were either being abused at home, abandoned, or orphaned. Dr. Brown Earl says too often children in care facilities are not adequately evaluated for anxiety disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, and depression.
Where we see those with the behavioral problems, the counseling must involve the caregivers in the home, and we're treating them as if they're a family unit. And we need to also give specialized training for the caregivers, for them to deal with their own unresolved conflict and personal issues, so they don't throw this onto the children.
She adds that flogging is often a cultural norm, and so it's even more important for the staff at care facilities to be a part of counseling sessions with the children.
Especially if we're teaching them to speak up for themselves, we're building a sense of esteem, and then the direct care provider says, but in face, they're not out of order. No, you might chat up to me.
Meanwhile, a St. Thomas resident is concerned about how children are reintegrated into society after leaving a care facility.
So they need to have somebody to monitor them even once a month to come back and find out how that child or my son is doing. If he's coping with the community, and if the community are coping with him. Because anytime you find that the community not coping with him, I'm run away, I'm not going to find friends.
Krista Campbell, TVJ News.
Last week's triple murder in Grange Hill, Westmoreland has revived concerns of crime in that parish. Residents are hoping for initiatives that will bring real change. Herman Green reports.
The murders of 3 men in Grange Hill, Westmoreland last week proved that an old problem is still present.
Remember, not so long ago, we had a gruesome killing in Grange Hill. So I'm hoping and I'm praying that we're not going back to those dark days.
But what has been causing the years of violence? The police listed scamming and gangs among the reasons, labeling the recent triple murder a reprisal attack. But for Parish Peace Initiative worker Bishop O'Neill Russell, it's a social problem that goes way deeper.
This is not a scamming war. I can assure you that. This is a generation war. This war has been going on from generation to generation. From man used to use stick and stone and fight. We have a border problem where men cannot go over that section and men cannot come over this section.
He believes that this antisocial behavior, coupled with idle hands, have made the younger generations more violent. It's why he suggests a long-term targeted program.
Social intervention is what we need. We need to go out, meet the young men, go speak with them, find jobs for them, create opportunity for these young people if we really want crime to be under control.
36-year-old Chriselle Hudson was among those killed last week. He leaves behind 5 children. But while agreeing with Bishop Russell, one business operator believes it's a societal problem.
We as a people have to change the way we think when it comes down to each other. You know, we cannot go around where a simple dispute is a knife or a gun. No, we have to learn to settle our differences better.
Herman Green, TVJ News.
Still on crime, a spate of robberies in Portmore, St. Catherine is causing worry among local authorities in the parish. In 1 week alone, there have been several robberies across 3 communities in Portmore. Kalisha Williams has that story.
Bridgeport.
A pro box with 3 men aboard jumped out on the person and took his phone, his knapsack with a water bottle. And he was pinned down on the ground and they took his stuff and left.
Greater Portmore.
A lady was walking home in 4 East Greater Portmore when a car with some men just come up to her, held her up, took her phone, her money, and just drove off like that.
And this intersection along the Mandela Highway, hotspots for robbers in the Portmore area in recent times. We were told in 1 week alone there were several robbers in the area, and the way in which the robberies are taking place is similar.
There is this consistent report of a white pro box moving within the communities and conducting these armed robberies.
Senior Superintendent Clive Blair is the head of the St. Catherine South Police Division. He explained that most of the robberies in the division have been linked to people outside the parish.
At the plaza at Caribbean Estate, that commercial plaza, those individuals involved in that robbery and that murder incident came as far as from St. Elizabeth. Now we are saying that this is quite some distance away from Portmore. We have also noticed some of these persons coming from all the way in Clarendon.
Portmore has been known for robberies and theft over the years, but Mayor Leon Thomas said the new trend is alarming.
I don't know if you can tell us from your experience if the increase of development that is taking place in Portmore and the number of residents that is now living in Portmore, if you have the amount of police, Portmore.
We need some improvement where the manpower is concerned, right? So the High Command is aware of that. All of that has been documented and forwarded up the chain of communication.
Kalisha Williams, TVJ News.
The Women's Caucus of the governing Jamaica Labour Party has issued a statement condemning a video in which a man is seen physically assaulting a woman. Gender Affairs Minister Olivia Grange and Senate Leader Kamina Johnson-Smith are both calling for public condemnation against domestic violence. Codian Barrett reports.
Jamaica Labour Party Women's Caucus firmly and absolutely condemns domestic violence in all its forms and regardless of its perpetrators.
That statement from Senate Leader Kamina Johnson-Smith last night in wake of mounting pressure on embattled Central Westmoreland MP George Wright to resign. It follows allegations made against the MP about a video where a man is seen beating a woman in Chester Castle, Hanover some time ago. Since then, the matter has evoked national outcry against domestic violence. The Women Caucus of the JLP wants the public to speak out when incidents similar to the brawl occurs.
These actions must not be condoned in any way, shape, or form.
We are determined to root out the scourge from our country and support every legal action to eliminate these horrible acts. As a group, we are collectively and individually distressed when a woman in any circumstance suffers abuse.
Both ministers have taken jabs at the controversial video, which has forced Mr. Wright to withdraw from the JLP Parliamentary Caucus and has been relieved of all duties related to the party. Despite the JCF ending its probe into the matter, the caucus says that the public's reaction to the video was sufficient.
As sisters, we stand in solidarity with her as she deals with not only the pain of the event, but also having it play out in the public domain.
The more the public stands up against these forms of behavior, the greater the chance of reducing and eliminating gender-based violence.
The caucus says it will focus on the work needed to address the issue and its consequences. Senator Johnson Smith says Jamaicans should use the opportunity to build greater urgency for social reform. It's the reason Minister Grange is calling for more to be done.
What is required is institutional change, cultural change, re-socialization through public education and education in our schools, together with continuous protection and support for victims and affected families.
Cody-Ann Barrett, TVJ News.
In the meantime, Gender Minister Olivia Grange says Cabinet has given approval for changes to the Domestic Violence Act. She says the government will pursue a number of amendments.
We will include a definition of the term domestic violence in the Act. The definition will make clear that domestic violence is not only physical, but also psychological, emotional, and sexual, and may occur in situations where intimate images are exposed to inflict harm on a person, among other situations.
She says there are different categories of people who will be allowed to apply for protection orders on behalf of an abused person.
We will also expand the conduct or behaviors that the court may prohibit the respondent from engaging in under a protection order. This will include a prohibition on taking possession of or damaging a property that the victim may have an interest in, as well as directing the perpetrator to pay compensation for monetary loss incurred by the victim as a direct result of conduct that amounted to domestic violence.
The Gender Affairs Minister was speaking in Parliament last evening. And it's now time for a break here on the Midday News, but please stay with us. We'll have much more when we return. And welcome back. We're continuing the news. Jamaica's COVID-19 positivity rate has been reduced to 15.7%. The Ministry of Health says 83 cases of the virus were confirmed from 458 samples on Tuesday. The country's overall case count is now 44,337. Meanwhile, 6 more persons in Jamaica have died from COVID-19, pushing the death toll to 744. 3 of the deaths were recorded in St. Elizabeth, 2 in Manchester, and 1 in Kingston. 2 more deaths are being investigated by the Health Ministry. More than $46 billion. That's how much revenue has been lost from the tourism sector in the fiscal year 2019-2020 because of COVID-19. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett gave a breakdown of the figure while making his presentation during the sectoral debate in Parliament last evening. Sandy Williams reports.
For the fiscal year 2019-2020, the government lost an estimated $46 billion from direct revenues it was expecting from tourism. This following the closure of the island's port after the emergence of COVID-19 in the country last year. According to Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett, $6 billion less flowed into the Tourism Enhancement Fund alone. The balance of the losses spanned airport charges, general consumption tax GCT, cruise taxes, and other government taxes. But even after the reopening of the ports in June, tourism revenue continued to decline. Mr. Bartlett was anticipating 2.8 million stopover visitors between April 2020 to 2021, with projections to generate almost $200 billion, but unfortunately that was not realized. Instead, he said almost 500,000 visitors came in the period, resulting in expenditure being $155 billion below forecast. This is separate from the revenue loss to the government.
What that meant is that the money that would normally go in the pocket of the little man in Ocho Rios and in Montego Bay, that would go to the supermarket to buy the things for the villas, that would go to the taxi drivers, and all of the players in the industry. That is what this $154.7 billion loss is.
Foreign exchange also dropped from $3.7 billion generated in 2019 to $1.3 billion in 2020. Despite the economic fallout, Mr. Bartlett said 2021 started off on a good foot.
Starting in January, we had 40,000 visitors. In February, we had 40,076. Small increase, but increased. And then in March, 69,000 visitors. And here the good news, even better, that so far for April, we have done 50,000 in 18 days. In 18 days. And what that means, Mr. Speaker, is that even though in 2020, the first 3 months was very, very strong, we earned some $720 million then. In this recovery program so far, we have gone 360 million up to the middle of February.
For Mr. Bartlett, the general outlook for the upcoming fiscal year is positive. He's anticipating a doubling in earnings and a tripling in arrivals for the sector this year.
Of this number, we hope to welcome 1.043 million stopover visitors, which is a 117% increase over last year's stopover numbers. Jamaica should have up to 60% coverage of the United States market by the end of May, and we anticipate some 800,000 airline seats which will become available for the upcoming winter season, and that is approximately 70% of the level that we experienced in 2019.
Sandy Williams, TVJ News.
Still on tourism, there's optimism in the midst of ongoing COVID challenges. That from hoteliers in Negril, despite more than a year of associated struggles due to the pandemic. But as Herman Green reports, that optimism hinges on a call for financial assistance for the industry.
It's been more than a year since several small hotels were forced to close due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But with the global drive for vaccination, especially for travelers and tourism industry workers, General Manager for the Rayon Hotel in Negril, Pansy Graceland, says there is hope. She says most small hotels have closed their doors since last year and are yet to reopen.
They will reopen when the winter season starts, because this would have been our slow season now. You know, we're getting into the slow season. April 15 is usually slow, all the way to like September.
It's hoped that from then to November, winter visitors will return to close to pre-COVID numbers. President of the Negril Chamber of Commerce, Richard Wallace, notes that of the over 6,000 rooms in Negril, small hotels account for more than 50%. He is optimistic as the pandemic has changed the taste of prospective visitors.
A lot of tourists now do not want to be inside of a large hotel with hundreds and hundreds of people. What is happening, and we received a lot of calls in the last few weeks and months, is that people are trending towards villas and small hotels. So new markets are emerging for small properties.
However, after a year of little to no revenue, there is a challenge. General Manager of Sharella Inn Hotel, Daniel Grizzle, explained that preparation for reopening is a costly venture. And so, while banks are lending, small properties need help they can afford.
You're talking of interest rate from the lowest I've heard is 7 up to about 10. Now, that's not acceptable. We are looking for a soft loan. At this moment, we need help, and we think that we're looking for a loan between somewhere 3.5% to see us through this period.
The industry players are hoping that this winter tourist season will signal a restart of the sector. Herman Green, TVJ News.
To other news, opposition spokesperson on foreign affairs and foreign trade, Lisa Hanna, is calling on the government to further strengthen the country's bilateral agreements with countries across the world. She says this is of utmost importance considering the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic is having on Jamaica's economy. She was speaking Tuesday evening during the sectoral debate in Parliament.
This realization should be the catalyst to reverse our obsequious patterns of diplomacy, which have been practiced over the past 4 years, which has been counterproductive to Jamaica's foreign relations history, and if not discontinued, will see the costs clearly outweighing the benefits. You see, Madam Speaker, to make Jamaica and Jamaicans great, we must be friends to all and enemies of none.
She's adamant that new alliances must be formed and a resetting of old ones must be carried out with urgency.
We must act with courage, doing what's in the best interest of our people rather than following like sheep to advance the interest of others with unclear motives which are often disguised as defense of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law.
Now, in relation to trade, Ms. Hanna says the country needs to resist from being reactive and start thinking ahead. She blamed the government for not having a foreign affairs policy which would foster economic development locally.
Our responsibility as policymakers, Madam Speaker, is to create an economic climate and mindset that will grow the Jamaican economy in a way that increases the per capita income for all our citizens. In the 14 years I have been here, we really have not moved the wealth needle forward. And our objective should be to move our grassroots to the middle class and our middle class to internationally competitive rates of wealth. This will not happen with speeches. And what's more, raw talent is simply not enough to monetize the opportunities available.
And here's a preview of what's coming up in this evening's Health Report.
In the next edition of the Health Report, we'll look at the safety and effectiveness of expired medications.
For example, let's look at insulin. Insulin has to be kept at certain temperature to be effective. But if it's not kept within the same the refrigeration requirements, studies what they run on the product, stability studies, efficacy studies show that it still can be used. So the manufacturer can determine conditions under which the drug can still be used.
That's the Health Report this evening in Primetime News. And now for today's Healthy Living tip. How to dispose of medicines at home. Flushing medicines. Because some medicines could be especially harmful to others, they have specific directions to immediately flush them down the sink or toilet when they are no longer needed, and a take-back option is not readily available. Disposing medicines in household trash. If a take-back program is not available, almost all medicines can be thrown into your household trash. These include prescription and over-the-counter drugs in pills, liquids, drops, patches, and creams.
And that's the Midday News. I'm Giovanni Dennis. Join us at 7 for Primetime News. On behalf of the news, sports, and production teams, have a good afternoon.